Guys.
Hi, how are you? Everybody healthy, I hope.
Everyone stay safe, 1.5 meters distance from each other. Okay. Well, I guess we can, shall we do it in the Dutch way and start at 3 sharp? Be really punctual. Cool. Okay. Hello to all the people just joining this webinar. Hi, my name is Matias. I'm the founder and CEO of PRLab. PRLab is a tech PR agency based in Amsterdam. We're specialized in startups and scale-ups. And we're also a community of marketing and communications professionals based in Amsterdam and all over the Netherlands. And we used to get together every 2 months to discuss innovation in the field of marketing and communications. Right now, we are adapting to what's happening. So we are going live in these events, and we feel honored to have Leoni and Peter joining us with such a short notice. So thank you both so much for joining us. And as I just mentioned, we are all navigating like a crazy, unprecedented moment all over the world. We are facing, humankind is facing a global crisis, and this virus and the consequences of the virus is having like a strong impact in our health systems, in our society, and in our economy. And unfortunately, we have no idea how long this crisis is going to last and the impact that it's going to have in our daily lives. And yeah, as I said, this is perhaps one of the biggest crises in our generation, in the whole century. So in times of crisis, it's really important to, let's say, stay calm and join forces to help each other and just try to help each other to navigate crises from people that have already done that in the past. And that's our goal with this webinar. All our events, we try to make them as educational as possible and to share as many insightful tips as possible. And we also try to make them as interactive as possible. So for the people that are just joining the live stream in the YouTube channel, please make use of the chat, because we're going to be reading your questions and we're going to try to address them as much as possible. Okay, so feel free to share your thoughts and questions, and let's just try to make this as conversational as possible, because that's our style and that's the style of the host as well. Now, it's my absolute honor to introduce you to the two very special guests that we have joining us today, Leoni Janssen and Peter Smit. Normally people will be clapping at this moment.
Maybe they are.
And I just want to thank you both so much for joining us today. We know how busy you both are. You're both reputation experts. You've been both working for many years in the field of PR. And at the moment, I know that this is your time to shine. So I'm confident that you're getting a lot of calls and emails from everybody. So I really would like to thank you both for joining us today. And welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Thanks, guys.
Be where I was all day already, but
yeah, it's true. So maybe if you guys would like to introduce yourselves, or you want me to introduce you, however you want, we can kick off.
Sure. Leonie, you want to go ahead first?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Leoni Janssen, and I have been doing communications and brand work for technology companies for a bit over 20 years. And I have not specialized in crisis communication in any way, but more a general view on how to communicate as a company. And also in difficult times. I started when .com went up, but that did not last long through as an industry. And now I was supposed to be in a massive initiative that will change enterprise technology on. We're not launching that today, so that changed. And there's a lot of things happening currently that professionals so we just have to rethink everything. And I think that is my key message today as we go through this webinar. Peter.
Thank you. My name is Peter Smit. I have been working in the beautiful area of communications for almost 30 years already. And I can say for sure that I've never seen a crisis like this. And I've seen some crises in my day. I am an independent consultant, work for international companies like, for instance, Heineken, eBay, and a lot more. What I feel is vitally important in this day and age, in this particular pandemic crisis, is to keep a cool head and try to realize also that this will also go away at a certain point in time. Of course, now in the initial stages of such a thing, everybody's always worried and thinking, okay, where will this go? Let me tell you, nobody knows. Not even us, the experts, know. So, I mean, that's, to answer maybe the first question already, we do not have the solution. We do have some tips as to how to, navigate your way through these difficult times. So whatever your questions are, just ask them, and we'll hopefully try to come up with some clear and concise answers.
Exactly. Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Leoni. So let's get started. Let's dive into this webinar. We have a lot of things to discuss. As you just mentioned, Peter, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how long this is going to last. And that's one of the challenges. And another challenge is most probably marketing budgets are going to be slashed. However, companies need marketeers and PR people more than ever. So my first question would be for Leoni. So what do you suggest? What's your advice for companies that still want to stay relevant with their communications?
Right. Well, relevance is the most important thing in any communication. It's actually up to the recipient of a message to decide what is relevant, right? It's not for the sender to decide. So the sender has to kind of have that feel for what is relevant. And what is relevant will change week by week. In the first few days when countries were locked down, it made sense to communicate about what you have done for your own people, for your own continuity, etc. Now we're 2 weeks in and it already feels completely different. We're starting to get into a new normal. So when it's about relevance, it's really about every company and every situation, it's different. So if you are in healthcare, as a company, what is relevant to your audience is completely different than if you're Heineken. So don't try to, there is not a one size fits all thing. Everyone really, really has to rethink their whole being actually, and therefore also their messages. Like what is important with that my company is going to change in the world? What is it that my company can contribute? What is it that this message can do for people? It can be either really helping people practically, it can be cheering people up, it can be entertaining, it can be advising, it can be all different sort of things. And for example, we're doing this webinar that is relevant for our audience, and it fits the kind of the professionals and the companies that we represent. But if you're creating bicycles, then you have a completely different thing to think about. And I think bicycles have a big relevance actually, because people want to stay out of the public transportation. So kind of taking that angle creates relevance if you're a bicycle company, for example. So what's your audience? What do they worry about? And what can you actually do for them?
And the timing it's really important as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and it changes a lot. So for example, I said I was supposed to be launching a technology initiative. Currently, we've postponed it. I don't know what will be the right time for it. It will be super fluid in the next weeks, months even. So it could be in 3 weeks that it makes sense to do it. It could be in 2 months. And then also the messaging needs to change because the audience has changed. The world has changed. So yeah.
True. And Peter, I have a question for you. Do you reckon that organizations can prepare for what's coming from your experience, especially in times of so much uncertainty?
No, you cannot prepare for what is coming, but you can prepare. And what I mean by that is that you could have put a process in place that will identify who are the main communicators in times of crisis, that can identify relevant stakeholders, that can identify owners of those relevant stakeholders. Now, why am I saying this? Because I completely agree with what Leoni just said. One size does not fit all, but there are a couple of things that you can do, everybody can do as a communicator. And for me, those are be as open and as transparent as you can be. And that does not mean that you have to, divulge everything that's going on within your own organization, but make sure that people understand where you are at a certain point in time. Now, this takes a little bit of bravery also from the side of communicators. So this is the time actually to step up and to, in my view, give your career also the next boost, because you need to be the trusted advisor for the C-level people within your own organization, no matter how big that organization is. A human tendency is when there's a crisis to sometimes bury your head in the sand. If I don't see you, you don't see me, the ostrich types. That doesn't work. So make sure that you stay in touch with all relevant stakeholders that are out there, because like I said in my introduction, this thing will go away. Now, and if you then, jump into the relevance that Leoni just mentioned, you have to stay relevant. Also, in the meantime, make sure that people understand your plight, your fight, your struggle, if you will. And building that understanding also helps to build trust, because people like organizations that are also vulnerable. Now, for you as a communicator, I think, like I said before, now is the time to step up and make sure that your own organization understands that it is imperative that you keep on reaching out to people. I always say, if you cannot talk about content, talk about process. So where are you at this particular moment in time? What are the next steps that you're going to do to make sure that you are still viable, that you're still alive as a company in the months to come? Also to your own internal audiences. And one of the main things in crisis, maybe we come back to that later in the webinar as well, is managing internal psychology for me. I mean, there's always something going on within organizations, because every organization has mistakes, because there are people working within an organization. The outside world understands that. The inside world, sometimes not so much, because when something happens, everybody wants to go out there and shout, and we have to do campaigns, we have to do this, we have to do that. But then it comes down to, again, like you said, Matias, timing, and like Leoni said, relevance. So hold your horses maybe a little bit at the moment. Manage that internal psychology. Do not start to go out there and start a battle. Wait. Be a little bit more patient and try to see where the timing is right now. This is for me a big part of being a communicator within an organization. You have to be sort of the director of that process. Not the director of everything, but the director of that process.
Yeah. I think also you're an extremely important gateway between the company and the outside world, both ways actually. And even more importantly now, translating what is the relevance, what is happening, what is shifting, what's changing, what's the need that the outside world has for your company, that can really come from you. And even if nobody asks you, so even if your CEO doesn't ask you to guide that process, they might not think you had it in you. Just step up and do that analysis and call him or her up and share what you have to say there.
Yeah, and also, guys, if I can add to this, I mean, I've been doing this for quite a long time. It sometimes just comes down to common sense. So use your head. It's not rocket science, but think. I always advise my clients to think scenarios. So if I'm going to do this, what will happen next? Be sort of a chess player. So you are going to make a move. How will that be perceived in the outside world? We had a little conversation before we started the webinar, the three of us, and I then mentioned I have a museum as a client, and they wanted to do something for people in healthcare, which is what everybody wants to do at this point in time. But then coming back to Leoni's point in terms of relevance, a museum doing something for people in healthcare might not seem like such a logical solution. So I told them, why not do something for educators? Now, this might sound like a very easy and normal idea, but people jump to conclusions just a bit too quick. So first, if you have an idea, and ideas are wonderful, so by all means, generate ideas, But if you have an idea, then take a step back and think, okay, if I put this idea out there, what will happen? What will people think of us? Because now, you know, sometimes doing the right thing gets confused with, you know, a little bit of too much marketing at times. It has to be something that comes intrinsically from you as a company. If you want to do something that really fits you as a company for the outside world, by all means do so, but don't do something because you feel obliged to do something.
Right.
Yeah. And I think you just mentioned something really relevant, Peter, and you too, Leoni. I think lately all of us have been reached out by companies saying like, hey, should we communicate? Should we make a statement about what's happening? Should we say that we're supporting people or not? Like, what should we do as a company, right? And what are your thoughts on this? Like, do you think it's still relevant if a company says, oh, we're making our employees work from home? Not anymore. Is it a good time to launch a product? Not anymore. What are your thoughts on the timing right now and what companies should be doing in terms of corporate communications?
Right. So that really depends. One, in what country you are. So if you're in India, saying that your people are working from home was relevant this week because they just closed down. So that's timing. But on the other hand, also depends on audience and kind of type of communication. So on LinkedIn in the Netherlands, it's currently outdated to say, are people working from home? Because, you know, everyone is. And in most countries they are. But to post something on your website that holds your contingency statement is something else. And you might want to update that every week. Like, what are you as a company doing to stay operational? And in that statement, you have to say that your people are working from home and that all your systems are are safe. And so yes, there you have to say it. And on social media, you don't say it anymore. So that really depends.
Yeah, if I can jump in, I completely agree. But for me, at this point in time, because you see indeed a shift in let's say information gap. So a lot of people know that they have to work from home. For me, at this point in time, it's very important that you keep the internal lines open so that people within the organization know what is going on. Two reasons for that. One, because they are concerned, obviously, because do I still have a job within a couple of months? And secondly, your own people are your number one ambassadors. So if you can give them clear messages as how to your company is addressing this situation, they will start to share that with people. I mean, you know, probably via phone and via these kinds of things, not anymore in person. Yep. Maybe 1.5 meters distance away, so you have to shout a little bit. But you know, it's very important that you give them those messages because they can help you spread that. And what that does for me, if you have a clear message, and this clear is a very vital word in this sentence, if you have a clear set of messages and they can share that with the outside world, it will help to build trust also within your own organization, but also to the outside world. So it's not just about communicating on social media, but also keeping your own people in the loop.
Absolutely. And your own people will say it in a different way as well. They will say, it's really true.
Exactly.
Right? So that helps.
Yeah.
So something that we mentioned just now is that we are navigating times of uncertainty. We don't know what's happening. And that also creates confusion in terms of what we just said, like what to communicate, what not. On the other hand, a lot of the people that are joining this webinar have, let's say, roles doing PR, marketing, heads of comms, even we have founders, but I can imagine that a lot of organizations are debating where should they shift their communications towards what's happening and completely stop with product communications, or if they should keep pushing product communications to support, for example, sales goals that most probably right now OKRs are being slashed by this crisis. So what is your advice to all these PR communications, marketing professionals during this webinar, when it comes to deciding what to communicate? Should they listen to, for example, their CEOs, CFOs, and chase all these like numeric sales goals and try to sell as much as possible? Or should they actually stand up for themselves and push back? When is a good idea? When is a good time to push back? When is a good idea to actually follow advice? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think nothing currently should go as it went a few weeks ago. So just continuing what we did before and expect the same results, I think is illusional. It doesn't mean that everything needs to stop. Things might need to be altered. And it really depends on the product and the relevance again. And also maybe you can still offer products, but just maybe you have to change the way you talk about it. I think the most dangerous thing currently is try to push something just for the sake of trying to hit a number. Because if you're blindsided that way, that will be the least commercial thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I think one of the roles that we as communicators have is to say to our C-level people, forget about the numbers, because we're not going to make them anyway. So, I mean, that's just a fact of life. We will maybe get a rally after this and, and then sell our stuff again. So that's one point. The other point is, I think that this was very relevant word in your question, Matthias, is push. Don't push at the moment, because people are concerned about something else than buying your products. And of course, like Leoni said, you have to have some sort of, people are going to buy stuff. So, I mean, it's okay to show them that you still have that stuff. That's okay, but don't push. So again, this comes down to using your common sense and think, okay, we are now in this campaign. Should we continue this? Think scenarios again. One of the wonderful examples I always use in my presentations is a couple of years ago, we had a sort of similar situation like this in Hong Kong with the SARS epidemic. And, they thought about everything. So all the measures on the airports and everything, everybody was checked and wonderful. One thing they didn't do was look at their own marketing campaign, because if they would have looked at that more closely, they would have stopped it, because it was promoting Hong Kong as a city. And the payoff literally was, Hong Kong takes your breath away. Now, I don't think that's a very good slogan to carry when you have something that affects your lungs, right? So, and this is a very dark example, but, look at that and think, okay, what if we put this out there? What will people think about us? At the moment, for me, in this current situation, of course, this will change because the situation is completely fluid. But at the moment, I'm saying functional communications. So if people need to know something, make sure that they understand it, make sure that they know it. But then really for the moment, and that can, maybe change in 1 or 2 weeks, I don't know, nobody knows. Then maybe you can start to maybe do some little bit more marketing, but for now, keep it functional, I would say.
Yeah. Also, when you say, Peter, we're not making our numbers anyway, which is absolutely true. The chances that you're not making your numbers a few months from now, if you blow your brand, is even slimmer. So,
completely agree. Yeah.
We got a question from a member of the audience. She's basically saying that, and this is actually a really good question, it's something that I think we need to discuss. How can we go about our narratives when it comes to communicating? Some companies have a really bubbly, happy narrative, especially on Instagram stories. But at the same time, people are suffering, people are losing jobs, people are dying, and the economy is being slashed. So what's our advice when it comes to how to communicate with our audience as a brand?
It really depends on what type of brand you are. So if you're a musician, it makes perfect sense to make music for the people and entertain. Also, if you are a beer brand, or if there is always a lightness to that, because that's very much about going out and entertainment. And it's good to rethink it and to maybe keep the format, but change the content a little bit, for example, and make it more appropriate for these times, even if it's just an in-between phase. So I would not say that you cannot do anything that is light and entertaining, as long as people understand it's not for selling anything, but it's for being there, for being around. You were there always, you keep doing what you do. And you have also included your message about care and concern for what's going on. So that could be a mix, also, again, depending on what type of organization you are. And I see a lot of funny and happy stuff going on as well on socials, and I don't think we need to shut everything down.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, and again, it comes down to, and this is one of the main words for this webinar, I would say, relevance. So, I mean, you know, make sure that the bubbliness that you use is used in a relevant way. So if you use it to, you know, make people a little bit more, well, maybe a little bit less pessimistic, I mean, I would say go for it. But again, it comes down to, if we put this message out there, what would that mean for us as a brand? What would it mean for our trust? What will people think about us? So that really is a case by case exercise. If you are used to, you know, putting the most wonderful and exciting and bubbly messages out there, I would say at this particular moment in time, and again, you know, that might change in a week or two, I don't know, tone it down a little bit. Just a little bit, you know, stay close to the culture that you have, but tone it down just a little bit, because, you know, people will not understand you going to be cheery in times of these kinds of crises. I also do messaging training, and I always say, and this again, you know, forgive my Dutch bluntness, but I always say there's a difference with a speech for a funeral and a speech for a wedding. So if you keep those in mind, you know, then maybe you will be able to tone down your message just a little bit, but, you know, stay close to who you are.
Good tips. We just got a question from Angelica that works in the tourism industry. And she's asking, what's your advice to marketing comms professionals working in industries that are most affected by this COVID crisis? Travel, hospitality, events.
Yeah. Good question. That is really depending on what you're trying to do currently with your company, but also with your communication. And that is so usually when you do communication planning, you create your communication plan as kind of a result of what the company plan is. I am sure if you are in tourism that your company plan is up in the air. Right, that's up in the air. So then you have to gather together and come up with an in-between, because everything you do will not be, well, you're not going to be selling trips anytime soon. It would be even stupid to kind of assume you would. So what can be the role of your company and therefore your communication in this void? And that is not an easy one, I think. But as for example, the museum that Peter mentioned, they're not going to be open anytime soon either. But they could look at what they have to offer. They have a lot of knowledge. Can they package that and give it away to education? That's close to the brand, close to their raison d'être. What is close to the raison d'être if you're in tourism and there's no travel? Is that also about knowledge of the world? Is that what you can share?
Yeah, and if I can put in my 2 cents, first of all, and there's no sarcasm here, but particularly people in the travel and tourism industry, good luck, because, you know, they are, I think, being hit the hardest at the moment, apart from the people that get ill, obviously. So that's a very difficult situation, but you also see some initiatives arising there already, because what I saw this morning was that a hotel chain on Schiphol Airport now offers rooms at a very discounted rate for people who do not want to work at home anymore. Because, you know, I think there 2 things will happen in the working from home situation. 1, we will have a birth wave in 9 months, I think, and 2, we will have a divorce wave in 9 months, I think. So that's the 2 things. So and then they think, okay, we have these rooms. Why not make them available for people that don't want to work from home anymore? And also, some hotels are reconstructing their hotels to accommodate corona patients. So this is something that really,
relevance again, right?
Sorry?
That's again relevance in both.
That's relevance, because you have these rooms. So how can you make your business relevant to these kinds of people? Now, that's the hotel industry. Then you have, of course, the airline industries. They have come to a standstill. For them, it's survival. So they really need to look at their businesses at the moment, seeing, okay, where can we save money? And in this kind of business, internal communications, for me, is the most important one at the moment, because people that work within airlines are fearing for their jobs, and rightly so, I'm sorry to say. So that's a bit of a problem. Again, make sure that you keep the lines open as to what you are doing. I think that's vitally important. People should not forget about you once this thing is over, because in a couple of months, people will start to go crazy again, and start to book their holidays if we are allowed to. So there will still be relevance, but now make sure that the audience understands what you are doing at the moment to make sure that you're still there after the crisis. This is something that communicators can do within this industry. But it is of course a bit of a dire situation that they are in at the moment. So my sympathies go out to them.
Yeah, good points. I think it's also important to prepare for, let's say, not so pleasant communications. We see coming companies who have to lay off some employees, and we will have to be the ones communicating that, like eventually to certain like different stakeholders, for example, to investors that the shares are going down, people being laid off. So what's your advice for communicating this kind of like sensitive news and company statements in times of crisis?
Mm-hmm. I think again here it starts internal, of course. What I would advise any head of communications currently is to be in so close contact with the CEO and make sure that this is not something you get faced with all of a sudden. You get time to prepare, you know where it's going. But also what I would advise everyone, especially internally, is to keep a constant cadence. Even if there's no bad news, even if there's no news, just keep a cadence, like what's up, what's going on, in what shape are we as a company, keep the cadence, keep people, keep connected to people. It's much harder when people are not coming to the office anyway. And then externally, if you have to do news like that, you just have to break it. You just have to be clear, but also make sure that the way you bring it across is caring and committed to both your people and the market. But it also needs to be clear and consistent, and you'll just have to bring it. I think the upside currently for having to bring bad news is that nobody will think it's mismanagement or it's your fault. That's an upside, but it will be kind of bad news on bad news on bad news, so no one will feel great about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it comes down to trust. So, people in your own organization, but also your external stakeholders, should really feel that they can trust you in, being honest about these messages. I mean, if it's bad, it's bad. Just say it as it is, because that's the only way that you later on can survive as a brand in terms of your reputation. So I think that's vitally important, and also be honest. And this what I mean by this is, do not use, coming to your example, Leoni, do not use this situation as an excuse to maybe get rid of some people, because people will find you out, and once they find you out, they will come to get you, because then bills will be settled. So be honest about it. If you need to lay off people because of this situation, then be honest about it. Do it really concise. Take all the pain in one, because if you keep on spreading that out, then you will keep on getting into the news in a negative way. So make sure that you, as clearly as possible, communicate what you need to do, explain why that is, and explain what the perspective will be going forward. We had a couple of conversations before this webinar, and we as communicators use formulas, and the formulas I always like to use in crisis situation is CAP, C-A-P, which stands for show concern, so that you're worried for the people that are affected by this. Show action. So what are you going to do? That's the A. What are you going to do? What are the steps that you are going to take? And then the P is show perspective. So what will this lead to? So where will we be in the future? What does this mean? And a very simple message can be, we have to say goodbye to 500 of our colleagues, unfortunately, because we need to safeguard the jobs for the other 35,000. So these kinds of messages. So make sure that people understand why you're doing what you're doing, and make sure that they are clear as to what is going to happen. I mean, that everybody wants to. Nobody likes bad news, but if you're honest, people will take it.
Leoni, you use a different formula, right? Similar but different.
Yeah, so it's more like kind of it's a checklist for if you're communicating something in times of crisis. I use the 5 C's and the 3 T's. The 5 C's are for clarity, coherence, consistency, and then the 2 ones that are often forgotten, and I'm sorry to say it, by men, is care and commitment. Well, not by you guys, of course, but I see it a lot with men. Care and commitment. And then the 3 T's is tell the truth.
Yeah, agree.
Come on. Awesome. So we're getting a lot of questions, a lot actually.
Good.
I will ask you, I will pick one. Oh, this is a really good one for you, Peter. Any tips for how can I use this scenario to prove to management/clients they need a written crisis comm strategy and that they should dry run it several times?
Yeah, well, I always say never waste a good crisis. So, if people make mistakes, that will allow you to, discuss after the fact how we're going to do that better. And I think every organization can do better, even if you're a really experienced organization and you have a crisis team in place, what have you. You can still do better, And it's probably not a surprise coming from me that I say, prepare as well as you can, and that starts with, again, here it is, to be brutally honest to yourself as an organization. I am sure, 100% sure, that everybody at a certain level within the organization knows what the potential crises can be. Now, then again, it comes down to, are you the ostrich or are you the lion? So are you going to, fight this, or are you going to hide away from it? So if you can identify those potential problems, make sure that you put them on the table and fix them. That's the best way to prevent ending up in a crisis. So yes, I see this as a great opportunity to have that conversation, but make sure that you are ready to have a real conversation then. So not just about, preparing for crisis, but really looking at the organization as a whole to determine, where can things go wrong. One of the, wonderful is maybe not the right word, but wonderful examples from the past few months is, for me, an organization like Boeing. They are in a world of hurt at the moment. Why? Because their company culture did not allow for them to, remedy what was wrong with their airplanes, with this Boeing 737 MAX. The company culture there is, and this company culture is always a problem when it comes down to ending up in a crisis or not, right? If you have an excellent company culture where there's openness, where whistleblowers are rewarded, etc., you will still make mistakes, but the chance of ending up in a real crisis becomes slimmer and slimmer. If you're an organization that, sorry, what's that, Leoni?
Oh, nothing.
Okay. If you're an organization that puts that under the rug and has as a main KPI sell stuff, then I can predict you will end up in crisis situations. So yes, have that conversation, but make sure that you also look at your company culture and not just at the crisis process.
Right. Maybe one bit of a nasty thing that you could do if it's hard to convince people in the board that preparation is needed is create a little crisis yourself. I've done it, kind of simulate something that goes wrong. Make a phone call to someone that he or she should answer in a specific way, and kind of take record of the fact that he or she is not doing that. Mm-hmm. Test if the scenario that you have in place, if it's actually working. If A happens, does B happen then as well? Are people picking up the phone, starting to use the protocol that's in place, and prove it if it's not working? Because they will, as Peter says, they will understand what it will cost if it really goes wrong.
When it comes to creating a crisis plan, what are your tips for that? Like, I know you both are very experienced with creating crisis response plans. So what are the top 2-3 tips for the people that are watching us right now to not forget or like to follow when it comes to creating it?
Right. Well, the three things I would say is team. Make sure that all the roles that you need in a crisis are lined up. Who are they? And I would always want the CEO to be end responsible for a good crisis. Like if it's labeled as a crisis, the CEO needs to be responsible. So team and responsibilities, and scenarios that you have to have leading scenarios in your plan. I think for every company you can come up with the 5 most likely scenarios and really kind of work these out.
Yeah, well, my tip, my number 1 tip would be call us. But apart from that, of course, again, it comes down to, you know, be honest. So look at your organization really closely, look at it through the eyes of the outside world. So what could they think about us? Like Leoni said, I completely agree with that. Have clear lines of command. So make sure that everybody understands their role in a crisis team. Don't make the crisis team too big, because sometimes, you know, everybody wants to be a part of the crisis team. Exactly. 3, maybe 4 people, but that's it. And then everybody else that you need, let's say, as a sort of a functional specialist, you can get them in whenever you need it. Because otherwise, no decisions will be made, and that is very devastating when you're in the time of crisis. So that's one. Again, like Leoni said, build scenarios, but then also practice those scenarios. Practice, because, you know, I do a lot of crisis training, and you see people make mistakes in a very closed and safe environment of such an exercise. So you identify what could go wrong in the process that you are going through during a crisis. So that always helps. And my final tip is cluster your various potential crises under a couple of headers. So for instance, there's a header called management. So what can go wrong in terms of management? There's a header called location. What can go wrong in terms of your location? There's a header called product. What can go wrong with your product? There's a header called criminal. So what could go wrong in terms of criminal exercises? And there's a header which I would like to call acts of God. Now, if we're talking about something today, it's an act of God, right? That doesn't mean that you can prevent it from happening, but you at least know what the process will be during such a crisis. And that will help you to not to start panicking, because this is one of the worst things that can happen. You start to panic within your own organization because you don't have the process in order. And by process, I mean, again, what is the crisis team, but also who are our main stakeholders? What are their names and phone numbers? I mean, that might sound like a detail, but when you're in a crisis and you don't have those, you're in a world of trouble, really, trust me. So those are my most important tips, I would say. And of course, having my phone number.
That would be my first go-to option for sure. When it comes to, I think we've been talking about a lot of concepts and a lot of plans, but maybe let's see this in action. Let's try to be less abstract and put it all in practice. What have you seen as in the last, let's say, 2-3 weeks as the best practices when it comes to COVID or other crises that you might pop up in your mind at the moment, and things that you are like, don't do this, like organizations are doing it completely wrong in your opinion? What are the do's and don'ts, basically?
Yeah. Well, in terms of COVID, I think, you know, everybody's doing it quite okay. So, you know, in this particular crisis, I also advise my clients, look at what the authorities say, look at what the experts say, because, you know, none of us are medical people, maybe some of us are, but the most of us aren't medical people. So I'm thinking that's the best advice that you can give. If you look at general crisis, I already talked about Boeing. I think Boeing is a terrible example. So I think they've done everything that could go wrong. They've done wrong. Volkswagen, of course, is an example of something that keeps on going wrong. So that's not one to really look at favorably. What I liked in the past, well, the most famous example, this is an ancient one, is Tylenol, of course, in the States. And what I said by never waste a good crisis, they even had their packaging in such a way that it's impossible to open it without it being noticed. So I mean, you know, there's also room for product improvement in those kinds of cases. And one example I liked from the relatively recent past is Kentucky Fried Chicken in the UK and in Ireland ran out of chicken. Now, for a restaurant that has chicken in its name, that's a bit, that's sort of a crisis. But they turned it around because their logo is KFC. And in their social and other media outlets, they used the different order by using FCK, putting it on their buckets, like fuck, because they really made a mistake. And then they showed their audiences, how are we going to remedy this and make sure that it will not happen again. So those are the examples, and I'm thinking in terms of the negative ones and in terms of the positive ones. And one I like for a client of mine in terms of the COVID is Heineken is one of my clients. And what they are doing is they've set up a platform where you can support your local favorite bar or restaurant by buying a coupon that will allow you to, once they open again, use that coupon as a sort of a check to go in and buy stuff with that. That means that these companies still have cash flow at the moment, and they will have clients when the crisis is done. So this is, again, coming back to what Leoni said earlier, this comes down to being relevant. So for a company like Heineken, it's very logical to do something like this. So this is what I like. So this means you're not talking about the COVID per se, but you are using your power as a brand to make sure that the people that you do business with still stay in business. So I really like that example.
Yeah, there was another example that was somewhat in the same lines, but I didn't like so much. That was from Aviation Gin, and they said they were gonna donate 30% of their revenues of all the sales that they're currently doing to bartenders everywhere, because these are a group of people that they don't have a job often currently, and so it sounds like a sympathetic campaign thing to do, but then if you look into it, I don't see how they're going to do it, and I'm sure that they don't have the phone number of the bartender I used to see. I think it's a massively dispersed group of individuals that is almost impossible to reach. So I think it's a half promise that comes across a bit as a commercial thingy. I might have it wrong, but I might be more cynical than most people because I'm in this business. But I think that is kind of a bit on the edge of where you should go. I really like, for example, currently how Albert Heijn is taking his role in community and society. I live in a village where we have one Albert Heijn, and the supermarket manager really is. I don't think she even lives in this village, but everyone knows her. She's in all the Facebook groups. She talks to people. They put toilet paper in. They give a discount on toilet paper when everyone is kind of buying way too much of that. They take the responsibility of a brand saying, "Don't worry, we're here. We're taking responsibility. You'll be safe in our hands." That is a very powerful thing to do, I think, in times like this.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, also in terms of crisis, it also comes down to be a mensch, be a human being. So don't be a corporation, because people in times of crisis, they want comforting words. They want to know that you're in control, that you take control, that you are there to take care of them. So be a person.
Yeah.
And that leads me to one question that I just saw coming in, saying people suggest to stay neutral in communication. What do you think? This is like an evergreen question, in my opinion. It always pops up. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it really depends on what your message is. So if your message is, my heart goes out to these people, and if you do that neutrally, it's not believable, right? But for example, if you have a press release on that you sold more bicycles like Van Moof did, that's a results-driven announcement that they have, and that they maybe struggled with how are we going to bring that news. I think they did an okay job in making that a neutral fact, and not making it about sales and super commercial. So if your message, so it really depends on what you want to get across. Yeah. I think it's fine to be very emotional if it makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, I think there is no such thing as neutral communication. So, people will always have an opinion about that. So whatever you say, even if it's a very, factual tone, people will say, why are you so factual? And if you're emotional, people say, why are you so emotional? So again, looking at the outside world for me is relevant in terms of, okay, what can they do with this message? What am I telling them? Is that relevant to them? Then they will still have an opinion, because people will always have an opinion about you. So again, there's no such thing as neutrality. Just live with it. If you think now this is the time, this is the way that I should put out my message, by all means do so. But please, 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 thought about it beforehand. So again, it comes down to what I said before. Think scenarios. Think as a chess player. If I'm going to do this, what will they think? Because if the outcome of that question is, well, they are not going to like us very much, then they will do it.
Maybe not. Yeah.
Don't do it. But if the outcome is, some of them will think, okay, this is okay, and some of them will think it is not okay, and you still make the decision, by all means, do it. But think. That is my message.
Good one. That's a really good one. We got 2 questions about working from home, which is actually something that is quite relevant at the moment. One is about how to keep, what does it say? I'm gonna read it to you. What can corporate leadership do to maintain engagement, visibility, and business as usual when many people are working from home? And the other one is actually a bit more tougher. It says, what is your advice on dealing with fatalities in the organization due to the pandemic, especially with working from home and social distancing?
Right. Dealing with fatalities in your company is absolutely under crisis communications, right? So one of the scenarios I would always have in a crisis communication plan is fatalities. Someone can fall from the stairs, or someone can die from corona. Every company needs to think about the possibility that it could happen, and also what is a good way for us to communicate about that internally. Some people, some organizations like to do services for people, also depending on how well your colleagues and how big the company is. I think it makes a lot of sense to pay attention and to give it real attention. But it needs to fit with a specific company culture. Kind of for leaders of companies to keep in contact currently with people, you'd have to change your way completely, because people are not coming to the office. And if you did a monthly all hands call or a quarterly all hands call until now, and just team meetings here and there, I think you really, really have to rethink that as a company, and create kind of virtual water coolers so that people also have chats. And there was a Friday afternoon drinks that people are currently doing on video as well. So there's different ways, and also again needs to fit with your culture.
Yeah, I agree. And I would also say, again, it comes down to, be a person, because, if somebody dies that you work closely with, of course, that is a big thing. And it also depends on the number of people. So, I mean, if it's an individual, it's easier to address. And I don't mean this in a bad way, of course, but it's easier to address because it's a one-on-one conversation. And, it's very easy for a C-level or a management level to reach out to the relatives of that person. If it become more people, then people, of course, start to get worried, and what I've done in the past with a couple of oil companies, because they have oil platforms in the North Sea, for instance, is what we call next of kin teams. So this means that we, give people messages to make sure that relatives and people that are worried can call to these dedicated teams, who are very empathetic individuals, because they need to be empathetic in those cases, very empathetic individuals who can say what the guidance from the company is. And of course, in this particular case, this pandemic, this corona pandemic, refer people if they are worried to the medical professionals. I think that will be the best advice to give in these kinds of cases.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time. So I will read one last question, and then I will let you both maybe just share your final words with the audience and your last pieces of advice in these hard times that we're living in. So the last question says, do you see a difference between marketing and PR professionals, as in like who should be in the lead? Where are the best ideas come from, etc.? Like, that's a tough one, in my opinion.
Well, I think especially in times like this, where budgets are slashed, quite likely, and we're really, really down to good old storytelling, news creation. I think this is a very good opportunity for PR to lead. So for everyone who's from that background, I think this is a massive opportunity for PR to lead.
Yeah, I completely agree, because I also think that you know, both disciplines, of course, have their uses, but I think they're also different animals. So you know, the marketing people are more or less and I'm not trying to offend anyone, but more or less the happy people with the nice campaigns and you know, and the look to the outside world. Whereas PR people are more into, okay, let's think a little bit before we do this, and so they're the more cautious types. Now, at this particular moment in time, I think we need the more cautious types. So I think, and I agree with Leonie there, the PR people should be in the lead in this situation, and of course that might change again over time. But for now, I'm thinking PR before marketing.
Also, PR is public relations, and relations is both ways, and that's really what is this about.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, any final words, any final piece of advice for people that are maybe wondering, okay, what should I do now? How can I communicate this properly? How can I deal with my annoying CEO? Or if you are the CEO, how can I instruct people on what to communicate and what not? Anything that we haven't covered so far that you would like to share with the audience?
I have two things to say, and then I'll wrap it up. For everyone, don't assume anyone else knows better than you what to do. Don't assume anyone has been through anything like this, because nobody has. So your thinking is as good as anyone's. Rethink everything, open conversations, and don't take orders. If you ever did that, stop doing that now. So that's one. And I think my last thing would be, us as professionals in this community should really, really be there for each other currently. And I just want to say that I am there for everyone who wants to who wants to just kind of bounce an idea off, and just use the community.
Yeah, I completely agree. And if I can give my piece of advice, this also basically is in line with Leonie is saying: be brave. I mean, now is the time to be brave. Don't be afraid, because you know this is the loophole, the gap that maybe you've been looking for all your career. So make sure that you step into it. Keep thinking. So always when you think, okay, now I'm going to do this, try to again, you know, look at scenarios. Make sure that you go down that path. Make sure that you look 2-3 steps ahead. That's one thing. And the third one, and I really want to emphasize this, because you know we are very much in a very down mood at the moment, all of us. It will go away again. Trust me. So you know, don't be too worried. Be concerned, but don't be too worried. It will go away. Make sure that you are prepared to go out there with a bang again once this thing is done. Thanks.
Thank you so much, guys. And yeah, I would like to finish with exactly what Leonie and Peter just said. Rely on your community, ask for help. We're here to help. Be brave, stand up, be bold. Nobody knows exactly if we're doing the right thing or not, but trust your instinct, trust your gut. It's your time to show your expertise. And let's just help each other. These are hard times that we're going through. And as Leonie mentioned, we are also available. And I think you, Peter, as well.
Yeah, of course. I would really, like Leonie said, if you guys want to drop me a line or connect on LinkedIn, by all means do so. I mean, you know, now's the time to stand together.
Even to all the people that are maybe not based in the Netherlands that are watching this, at this moment, we just would like to help each other, and with whatever it is that we can help out, please feel free to reach out. I hope you find it as useful as I did, and you guys as well. And I would like to thank you both so much for joining, and to the audience for watching this. Please stay in touch and stay safe. That's the most important thing at the moment.
My pleasure. Stay safe and healthy.
Thank you so much again. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.